And our speaker, Lana Bleik, Fellow and Deputy Director, North Africa, Mediterranean and Sahel Program at the Stimson Center. Khadija Ihsane, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So there's a saying that every generation gets the challenges it deserves. And when we look at Africa, one has to say that the African continent inherited many generations' challenges at the same time. And today's security landscape, ladies and gentlemen, is no longer neatly divided between war and peace, between regional and national, between military and political. A coup in one country can shake the whole region. A conflict can travel faster than any diplomatic communique. And then you have multiple different variables that add up to the equation, making it almost impossible to resolve. Across the continent, the governments are asked, and we've been hearing that through this conference, they're asked to secure their borders, secure social cohesion, manage economic growth, secure also the health, school for their population, and navigate through a very insecure geopolitical environment. And there's also what we call les angles morts, or the blind spots, that they have to secure as well. So security today is much about anticipation and as reaction, and governance should go along with force and rule of order, theoretically at least. That's what we'll be discussing this morning. A brief note before we start our discussion. We were very looking forward to welcoming Honorable Charles Keter to this conversation. Unfortunately, travel realities remind us that geopolitics are not the only thing that a carefully crafted plan can fail. So due to travel unexpected delay, he was unable to join us today. But the good news is security, diplomacy, and strategy are subjects that rarely suffer from complexity and from a shortage of complexity. And with Lana Bleik with us this morning, we have a great opportunity to explore these issues from a uniquely insightful perspective, one that sits at the intersection of policy, geopolitics, and statecrafts. Why am I saying that? Because Lana spends her days decoding one of the world's most complicated neighborhoods, the space connecting North Africa, Mediterranean, and the Sahel region. At the Stimson Center, she looks at how diplomacy, institutions, and strategy shape security, and why some states should adapt solid defense security system and adapt faster than others when the rules at the game change. Lana, good morning.
Thank you, Khadija, and good morning to everybody. I'm grateful to the Policy Center for the New South for convening the 10th APASCO, a very important dialogue on security. And security means stability. It means impacts the lives of all the Africans. Africa population is 1.58 billion today, growing 2.3% a year. Median age is 19.5. The world youngest. By 2050, 1 in 4 people globally will be African. this population has been suffering and living and going insecurity. I want to start a little bit with kind of the aspect of insecurity of Africa. A defining feature of Africa's current security landscape is what may be described as the illusion of engineered stability. Across the continent, states increasingly rely on military force and shifting external partnerships to consolidate control with the assumption that security can be achieved through coercion and transactional alliances. From the Sahel to Sudan and Libya, the outcome is fragmentation rather than stabilization, producing more persistent and transnational insecurity.
Thank you, Lana, for laying the ground to our conversation with numbers and facts and reminding us that military is not the only solution. And we've been, I think there is a consensus about that during all the conversation we've been following through, since yesterday. But we see it, and especially you focus on the Sahel region. So what needs to be tackled? I mean, if it's not the military security, what needs to be tackled to build a solid defense security strategy by these countries?
So the problem with security in these African states, first, to build a strong, secure country is you have to have a strong leadership and eliminate any level of corruption, eliminate any personal transactional agenda, and ensure that these governments are built in a strong foundation. So you need to focus on building these institutions and developing a strong security system. The Africans have proved to the whole world that they failed on this level. They have not been able to build strong defense and security systems. So to start with, the problem is to address how these governments operate and how they are functioning and building these defense and security systems. The clear answer to that they are not doing a good job. And their system is focused on more transactions.
What do you call transactional, Lana? I mean, because since a couple of years now, almost a couple of years, this transactional strategy is a concept that we've been hearing in the news, being in the Western hemisphere or in the South. So what do you call transactional in the when we talk about African continent?
Right. So countries seems to be focused on tackling certain military operations, but missing to really restructure the whole foundation and institutions that should really take the terrorism and security on a larger scale. So they are more limiting their efforts towards small operations, but not really tackling and addressing the core issues of security within the whole governments and institutions of each state. That is a big failure. There is no way that you can really build a strong security in the country without focusing on this work. If you are just tackling small military insecurity operations, for example, in the Sahel, we have seen that. It's a big example. You know, how these countries, both the three countries, had the coup, and then things shifted hugely on so many levels. So they were not able to address their security and terrorism on a higher level, but they kept their operations limited to working with the Russians to support them. So this is a major issue in terms of security.
Well, if they're working with the Russians, if I may interrupt, is that because there was a disruption with their historical allies that are the ECOWAS that were supposedly that were supposed to be there to help them tackle and face terrorist threats. But the thing is, there was this disruption, this divorce with ECOWAS that gave no other, I wouldn't say gave no other choice because it's more complex than that, but here is a fact also that we shouldn't ignore while reading the situation in the Sahel.
Sahel is a very important example for Africa, actually, and the exit from the ECOWAS was a very strategic decision by these Sahel countries, and it was just to escape the sanctions, basically, because ECOWAS was, considering the coup and the terrorism as a major issue that's violating their, rules, and these countries decided to exit ECOWAS and build an alliance that will keep them separate from the rest of these international arrangements. And it did not address the issue of security in the region. We saw in Mali recently the defense minister was assassinated. So did it change in terms of the security in these countries? This alliance did not create any benefit in terms of security of the whole region. It just recalibrated the arrangements they have between the three countries. Mm-hmm. And they keep on working with Russians on their military support. That's also a big issue in terms of terrorism and security. So that's a big example in Africa, is that new alliance and how they exited from ECOWAS.
Yeah, but external scrambles are not specific to Sahel countries. I mean, there is external presence, being in the military or in other fields, not only economics, that is specific to a lot of African countries. So this is a reality today. So do you see, what's your stance toward these external scrambles and their impact of how those countries tackle the threats, the terrorist or security threats?
Right. I mean, again, they are all failing. And to start with, that's why we're all here, to address these issues. If it was not an issue, we would not be like having to discuss in a conference Africa security. But I just want to touch again on the Sahel Alliance, is that they exited, the reason they exited is that ECOWAS wanted to impose sanctions. And that was not good for these three countries to be sanctioned on the economic level. They will be impacted. So how to have the external engagement and keep these African countries secure and reduce terrorism? Every African country has a different dynamics, and I will go, for example, and touch on Libya. And Libya, as you know, is divided into two governments. So you have the East and the West government, and the one UN-backed government in Tripoli is the one who is engaged more with the international and external community, the Western community, and the one that's in the East, which is led by Khalifa Haftar, is the one that's working with the Russians. So every African country...
There are more actors than the Russians in Libya, by the way.
right. It's more complex. And you have the Turkish who are kind of maintaining some security and stability and providing support to the Libyans. And then you have also the European engagement to tackle the migration issue and illicit trafficking. So if every country has different dynamics and external actors. So basically, the external actors in Libya are not the same external actors in the Sahel, and the ones in Sudan are not the same in Libya. For example, in Sudan, you have UAE, who is funding the war and the rebels. So it's a more complex topic that needs maybe a panel by itself to discuss deeply how external actors play a big role in stabilizing Africa.
What about the Chinese? You mentioned a lot of
Yes.
actors, so since we're talking about the big ones, we can't miss the Chinese. The Chinese interests, economic interests are very well known. Is there any other aspects of Chinese presence on the African soil that maybe you could share with us, Lana, this morning?
Okay, the Chinese have more been focused in Africa on the business level, and they have been doing a lot of work with the African countries, especially on critical minerals. And for example, in Niger and Chad and Mali, they have been engaging with these states on resources. The focus was mainly resources. And an example of a big project was a $4.6 billion Niger-Benin export pipeline. The security shift is increased arms sales. China did engage with these countries also on military level, but it was more in terms of selling their drones, armed vehicles, to fill the Western vacuum. And they have the global security initiative to offer aid without political conditions. So the dynamics between China and these African countries is completely different from the other actors that we mentioned, such as the Russians or the Turkish. So really, China is focused on building businesses, engagements in the region.
So, but the region is also exposed to spillovers from other regions, which is very new to the African continent. Let me explain myself. We saw how the Russian-Ukraine war affected food security on the continent. And now we very much sense the Iran war spillovers over Africa again, be it in food security, be it the inflation is starting to go up after a pause and then down and best during after COVID, but now we can feel the impact on Africa. How do you foresee this impact of the Iran war on African countries?
The impact of the Iran war is not just on Africa, it's global. And everybody will have to pay the price of this war. Inflation, prices will increase globally. So, and Africans, how they will adapt and how they will adjust and be ready for this inflation, it's definitely alarming. And, but it can be a certain way an opportunity because the dynamics are shifting in terms of energy. And North Africa can play a role in terms of energy, gas and oil. They are very rich in gas and oil. Libya has been also already engaging with the Europeans and the Italians on how they can increase production, Algerians as well, in terms of gas. The discussion about for the fertilizers, the Moroccan produce phosphate, which is important to produce fertilizers, and that means agriculture, and that means reducing the prices of food. So there are so many different things that are interconnected, but what we definitely see is that the impact will happen, and the impact will happen globally, not just on Africa.
Mm-hmm. But do you think it would also affect the security of these countries? Because that's our main topic today.
So definitely a lot of, if you look at the security in Africa and really dig deep on what's really causing security issues in the region, and in this society, why an African will really take the risk to go through the desert all the way to the North Africa region to cross, in a boat, try to reach Europe. Food, economic, they are desperate on so many levels. The economic situation in Africa is already in a dire, even though it's so rich in resources, Africa has so many critical minerals, and their economy is growing super fast. But the African population, it's still considered very insecure and has a very high rate of poverty. So the problem is how these governments are going to be really working on the economy to provide opportunities for jobs and stabilize their population, stabilize their societies, and provide opportunities for Africans to stay and not take the risk to go through the desert, try to cross and,
What do you think the security challenge that's underestimated today, Lana?
It is underestimated, yes.
One security challenge that you identify as something that we don't talk about enough or that we don't tackle enough, and it's deeply rooted in security threats in Africa in particular.
There is something that I wanted the other expert to be touching on in terms of security, and I think tackling the funding and the resources that these terrorists and armed groups have access to. I'm glad that my colleague, Dr. Salem, touched on this issue a little bit. But when you are addressing security, I think states have to really focus on the resources and the funding these terrorists and armed groups have access to. Because if you want to really tackle security issue, and you are ignoring that level, which is the funding and resources these terrorists and armed groups have access to, then you will not be able to address security properly. And you will not be able to really solve the issue. And that's something I wanted to have a broader discussion with the experts here, is to tackle that, which is a very technical thing, is to really dig deep and address how these terrorist groups are operating and how are the resources being utilized other than what we discussed in the drones and all these technologies. But the funding part is really essential.
Yeah, I wonder how you can track those operations, especially being the trans-border crime and all the smuggling that makes the money of these groups, but also you have the hidden part, the part that we can't see on the dark web, as we discussed yesterday. But if there is one unique strategic shift that you think, Lana, African leaders should prioritize over the next decade?
They should prioritize their people. It doesn't seem like they're doing that job. They are failing their people, really. They are not taking, their work has been focused on, again, on transactions and building not strong security system. They haven't been able to build strong defense system. They have, again, great resources. It's a huge, the top country with critical minerals and resources. They have not been able to provide enough economic opportunities for their people to survive and thrive and grow, and not to take the risk again, to take their lives in risk, to leave and migrate. So again, this is an important thing that African leaders have to really take responsibility of their political work, their government, their institutions, their people. They should serve the people, and they're not doing it.
Okay. That's sad we finish this discussion with this, but that would be, let's finish with one...
Positive.
One recommendation.
One recommendation, again, the African population is the most growing population in the whole world, with the highest number of youth. And again, one out of 4 people in the world will be African. And that can be a potential of a new industrial hub. It can be China, the next China. Africa can have a lot of potential in terms of not just resources, but human resources, human capital. This is a lot of positive aspects of Africa that does not exist in other continents. The Western countries are aging. The African continent is growing into youth. So Africa needs to move towards really strengthening their institutions, their states, their population, and their economies.
Thank you, Lana, for your insights and candor. And this discussion today reminds us that, yes, security is not totally relying on military capabilities more than it relies on governance, political will. That's something that's been repeated again and again through the different discussions here, but also to adapt to new threats and how to tackle the root of the problem, or also the fuel of the problem in terms of funding. Again, thank you so much, Lana.
Thank you, Khadija.
And thank you all for being part of this conversation.